All right, welcome back to Lionheart Radio with your host, Rick Alexander. Today I am joined by Sal DiStefano. Sal is the host of the Mind Pump podcast. Sal, thanks for being on.
Oh, yeah, appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I've been excited about this one for a while. So, right now we live in the age of technology, we'll call it, in the age of open source information. And so the barriers to entry to get into the fitness industry have obviously been lowered substantially. And one of the downsides of that is that we'll call it people who have a propensity to kind of propagate bullshit are also given a microphone, we'll call it.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite parts about the Mind Pump podcast is that you guys have basically made it your living to, start calling out all of the bullshit that kind of exists in the industry. And I'm curious, how's that going for you so far?
When we first started the show, one of the things that bonded me and my co-hosts, and we didn't know each other before we did the podcast, so we actually met in person for the first time maybe a few months before starting Mind Pump. We had known of each other and we had mutual friends, and so we had set up a meeting to start, to talk about starting a podcast together. And before going to the meeting, I had fully prepared basically, what I would communicate to them. Because I wanted to be very clear to these potential partners of mine as to what, I would want to do with the podcast and what I was not willing to do. And number one on that list for me was integrity, to be honest as possible, be totally, totally honest. And I prepared this whole thing like, okay, I'm going to sell it to them, because if they maybe think, how are we going to get sponsors doing that, or how are we going to resonate with people? And we'd been in fitness for 15 to 20 years. And I thought myself, well, I think this message might resonate because people now, the fitness industry is long enough now, at least on a mainstream level, that people are, it's not uncommon now for people to realize that a lot of the information that they hear may not be accurate. If you go back 20 or 30 years ago and you see a before and after picture in a magazine, and in 30 days, I lost 60 pounds and, I got shredded.
Right.
You might not question it, right? This pill did it for me. You might not question it. But today, people are a little bit more savvy. They're starting to realize that, okay, hold on a second. There's a lot of this stuff is misinformation. And so I prepared myself. I said, okay, I'm going to tell them, look, I'm not going to compromise my integrity. I'm going to call people out regardless of who they are, how powerful they are. And we're just going to be totally honest and then figure it out from there. And, hopefully build a good audience, and then we might be able to monetize this thing. And so I got to we met at Adam's house, and I got there and we all shook hands and, nice to meet you and all that stuff. And I sat down, and before I could say that, I forgot who it was. It might've been Adam or Justin, started kind of talking about the same thing. So then I started talking about what I was going to say. And we were all like, it's like when you're when you're a fan of a cult movie, a cult classic movie, something that, very few people like, and so you're at the store and you see someone with a t-shirt, of that movie that nobody knows. And you're like, holy shit, I love that movie too. Oh my God, we're best friends. That's what it was like. I was like, that's what I wanted to say. And so we all just bonded over the fact that integrity would be our driving force. And so we started the show, and it was a bit of a risk and a gamble because, at the time, and today, it's still this way today, but 3 years ago or 4 years ago when we started Mind Pump, the main drivers of revenue in fitness were supplements. I mean, really, supplements were the main drivers, and then you had fitness equipment and gym memberships and stuff like that. But the main drivers like nutritional supplements. And so when we would come out and talk about the vast majority of the things that people are saying about supplements, or the training techniques and modalities people are talking about and how false those are, we knew we weren't going to make any friends, and we knew it would be hard to sponsor us. But luckily, we resonated. We resonated with a lot of people. I think it was a breath of fresh air for some people. The show grew, and we were able now to run a successful business as a result of it. But calling people out, it's not like we're trying to target people specifically, but some of the stuff needs to be said. I mean, I was a trainer for 20 years. For more than half of that, I owned my own training studio with personal trainers and massage therapists and nutritionists and all that stuff. And, and before all that, I was a 14-year-old kid who was really insecure about being skinny and wanted to lift weights and wanted to build muscle. And so I must have fallen for every single scam in the book.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many things I followed and people I listened to and products I bought. And I remember one product, there was two in particular. One was, I don't know how old you are, Rick, if we're in the same
31.
generation. I'm sorry?
I'm 31.
Okay, so we're a little bit of a different generation. But when I was a kid, 14, 15 years old, there was this supplement line called Cybergenics. And in the back of the muscle magazines, they'd have these pictures of these like before and afters. And it was, I didn't know this, right? Because I thought that was a real before and after. But the reality is they were bodybuilders who then let themselves get out of shape, and then they'd make that the before picture. And then the after picture was actually the real before picture.
Right.
So they look crazy. It's like the guy went from fat and then all of a sudden is like just jacked. And I'm like, this is, and then I look at the product and it was like 15 different bottles of pills. It was literally a shit ton of supplements and a schedule of how to take them. And I'm like, this is for sure going to work. Like, no way this isn't going to work. So I bought it. I spent like $100 of my own hard-earned money. I was like 15 years old. So that's like $1 million to me at the time. Mm-hmm. And I took all these supplements and followed their advice and got nothing. I got zero out of it. And then another product I remember buying was called Muscle Mix, I think it was called. And the picture was like, it looked like a vial. And I was like, well, that's got to be, that looks like steroids. That's probably going to work. And I bought that, and that didn't do anything for me. And I just continued going down this path of trial and error. And I was persistent as hell. And then, of course, training clients and doing all that stuff. And, so we have a personal passion for providing, the right information, like what works for most people, what you shouldn't waste your time, on, and what fitness and health are really all about, and what we found to be really successful for our clients. Because, as personal trainers, you train people, and, after the first 5 years where you're learning everything about proteins, fats, and carbs, and calories, and exercise technique, and correctional exercise, and all this other stuff, you start to realize all that information is useless, because a lot of these people, if they are consistent, they get in shape and then they stop. They don't see you anymore, and they just get right back to where they were before. So you start to realize afterwards that it's behavior changes, and really how you apply and communicate this information, that's just as important as the information itself. And a lot of that has kind of shaped, our message, and that's what you hear when you listen to our show.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. So telling the truth from a content producer standpoint can be a really good thing. One thing I've found is, I was telling you a little bit pre-show about our supplement company. And, when you're working a booth or whatever, and there's, a lot of the uneducated or not yet informed public comes up to you and they ask you like, oh, is this going to help me lose weight? Is it going to help me do this? And it's like, well, no, it's going to give you a marginal benefit on top of hard work, a lot of sleep, whole real food. And, it becomes almost a hard thing to sell, if that makes sense.
No, totally. It's harder. It's not expedient. So this is the thing. Like, if you're going to start a business and you want expediency, you want quick money, well, lie, cheat, and steal, and you'll probably do that. You'll probably get there a little faster. If I wanted to make a quick $1 million, I could create some bogus supplement and attach it to some good-looking, attractive, shredded people, and
right.
have them promoted on Instagram, and and make crazy claims and whatever. And I might do that, but that's it. That's all. That's as far as I'm going to go. I'm not going to go very far. It's not going to last very long. Plus, you have to live with yourself. And we're the kind of people like, I don't care how much you pay me. I have to live with myself eventually, and no money's worth, my own self-respect and my own character. So expedient, when it comes to being expedient, yeah, you could do that. But if you want long-term success, you got to be honest. That's just the bottom line. I mean, the companies that last the longest, that do the best, besides maybe those where they, participate in cronyism with, government, all that stuff, you gotta provide actual value. You gotta be honest. And you gotta have some integrity. You gotta display integrity. And so we're not in this for the short term.
Right.
We're just like when I used to train clients. If somebody came to me and said, what's the fastest way to lose 30 pounds? I would reply to them and say, well, do you want to know the fastest way, or do you want to know the best way? Because I can teach you the best way. I can also teach you the fastest way, but it's definitely not the best way. And then we would have a conversation. So, for us, like just from a business standpoint, being honest may not give you the quickest return, but in the long term, it's the only way to be, or it's at least a better, your odds of being successful long term are much higher when you're honest and you have integrity.
Yeah, it's like from a business standpoint, or from a business model standpoint, taking the educational approach is really long and arduous. But at the same time, the people that you do educate and the people whose lives you actually do change, they become very brand loyal, very tribe members.
Yeah, and the goal for us is to there's a few of them. One of them is we want to be the maven. We want to be the ones that if you're a trainer and you're looking for good applicable information and you want to know how to communicate this information, then go to Mind Pump. And not because we have the answers. We have some of the answers, maybe. We have a lot of experience, so we've learned a few things, but we also have maybe the guests that have some of the answers that you're looking for, that we filtered out. We found people that we find that have great integrity, great information. We put them on the show, or we put them on our YouTube channel, or we meet with them, get their information, and then because we're pretty good at communicating, we'll be able to communicate what they're trying to say in a way that may be more impactful to people, because information is important, but how you communicate is just as important. And if you've ever trained a client, that, like, I could give you 15 pieces of important information, and if none of them impact you, it doesn't matter. I could give you one piece of information, but if I say it and communicate in a way that impacts you in a fundamental way, well, now we see some change and see some difference. So we want to kind of be that maven where we can bring that information in, filter it, so it's a trusted source and you're going to get good stuff there, and hopefully be entertained along the way.
Right. Yeah, and that's an interesting thing from the coach's standpoint. If you focus too much on the technical hard skill, of course, of the sport or the athletic pursuit that you're trying to focus on, but you don't have the ability to communicate it, like you said, you're essentially an ineffective coach, and all of that information is all for naught to a certain point. Right.
I mean, is there enough? Can someone today, you just said in the beginning of the show, this is the age of information, and it sure is. And I don't think we haven't even seen what the age of information is going to bring us. But just today, right? Can the average person, the average individual in a Western civilized society or Western developed nation like the United States of America, does the average person have access to enough information to figure out for themselves how they should probably eat, how they should probably, move and exercise and all that stuff, how they can positively influence their health and change how they look for the better? Well, yeah, that information's all at your fingertips. Most people have a cell phone. Your cell phone, you're connected to all the information that's ever been recorded in all of human history. So the information is there, but why still are people having a problem? Well, it needs to be communicated. It needs to be communicated effectively. I have to be able to communicate to you, or whatever has to be able to communicate to you in a way to where you leave that, whatever you're reading or that video or the audio, the podcast, or whoever you're talking with, you need to be able to leave and go, I'm going to make that change today. That's something I'm going to change today because it makes sense to me and I really, really, really get it. Not that it just makes sense on a, like, okay, yeah, if you take in less calories and you burn, you lose weight. No, like it really makes sense, like on a personal level, like, okay, that is what I'm going to do. That is what I'm going to change. That's the only way to get people to change their behaviors. It's the only way to solve the obesity epidemic and the health epidemic. Is we got to be able to get people to really feel it, to make sense. And there's a few components to that, and one of them is you got to be a little entertaining, can't be boring, obviously, but you also have to communicate it in ways that it makes sense, and you also have to give people actionable, like real world ways of implementing things in ways that will actually work for them.
Right. Yeah, well, one of the interesting things, and maybe I don't really know where this part of the conversation goes, but one of the interesting things is the main, communicator in the fitness industry right now is Instagram, and the way that we communicate that is obviously by visual, by seeing. And one of the downfalls of that, and I think this is another problem that people are having, is they're trying to navigate, the overwhelming chaos that is the fitness industry, because, everybody's got these opinions. And when we're, attracted to the visual appeal of somebody, we tend to want to believe what they're saying. And then, those two things aren't exactly always related as far as actual knowledge and looking hot on Instagram.
Right. You want to ask yourself, I mean, there's nothing wrong with if you want to flip through pictures because you think people are good looking or whatever. I mean, that's fine. It's obviously your prerogative. You can do that if you want to. But if you're trying to improve yourself, pay attention to people who are providing you actual valuable information, things that not only make sense to you that you can apply and that you see beneficial change, and then try to ignore the other stuff, the waste of time stuff, or the stuff that makes you feel shitty about yourself. I mean, here's the reality. The reality about, we'll talk about Instagram. Our human brains largely evolved in, tribes and societies that really kind of don't look anything like the one that we're in today. I mean, this is a very small sliver of human civilization.
Right.
And the way we tend to judge our own ranking on the hierarchy ladder, if you will, like where you rank in society, like how valuable, I am to society, how much money I make, am I successful, am I good looking, all those different things. It's based off of the information that you have. Now, if you go back through most of human civilization, this was the people around you. Like, you were in your tribe of, 10, 30, 300 people, whatever, like that's your comparison. So if you're in a tribe and everybody's like super shredded, big fake boobs, like for the most part, if you take care of yourself, if you're relatively fit and you eat pretty good, you look pretty damn good. But you wouldn't know it if you were on Instagram all the time. You'd feel like you start feeling shit about yourself. So I always recommend people, I talk to kids about this all the time. It's like, look, it's okay to go on Instagram and look at these pictures and stuff, but you do that enough, and without realizing it, your perception of yourself starts to change. You start to feel bad about yourself. And we have actual studies on this. I mean, for example, let's say you're poor. If you're poor, but you live around wealthy people, the suicide rate goes up 5 to 10%. So if you're poor and you're around other poor people, it's not as bad. If you're poor and you're around richer people, it tends to be worse because you start to kind of compare yourself. Well, that kind of happens with your appearance too. And so I recommend people don't go on these. I mean, again, if you want to look at this stuff, that's great, but consider what kind of information you're feeding your mind. And if you want to improve upon yourself, like what I always advise is get rid of most of those pages. Don't follow them. You can always find them if you want to. It's really easy. Look up hashtag beast mode or whatever,
right.
and just follow people that kind of provide you value so you can improve upon your life in real meaningful ways.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. We have a lot of people that listen to this show that I think they've kind of gotten into the fitness industry and it's really become their lives, and they're trying to figure out their way to break into the fitness industry and kind of make it more than a hobby and make a business or maybe even a living off of it. When we go back to that first meeting that you guys had, you were saying you didn't know each other, which actually is pretty interesting to me because you seem to all be of very similar backgrounds. But did you go into that meeting thinking like, hey, I want to do a full-time gig with this. This is what I want to do next? Or was it kind of a side hustle and then see where it goes?
So we have to rewind a little bit. So I think maybe a year and a half or so before that. So at the time I owned a wellness facility or a personal training studio. So we had trainers, I had some massage therapists, I had acupuncturists, and the whole deal, right? And I would also train clients. And one of my clients, who's now our producer, was Doug. And Doug came to me as a client, he had back pain, and he wanted to improve his fitness, but also wanted to get rid of his back pain. And he was actually remarkably well educated when it came to fitness and nutrition. He'd been doing it for a long time. At the time when I first started training him, I think he was 46 or 47, and he'd been lifting weights and following programs and educating himself since he was a kid. So he knew actually far more than the average person. So he comes to me, referred to me by his chiropractor to help him with the back pain. We sit down and I kind of shoot down some of the myths that he'd believed for so long. And, body part split routines are the best for building muscle, which is not true for most people. And you need to work out every single day, not true for most people. And, you should train to failure in every set, not true for most people. And, we're sitting there talking about these different things. And, he was intrigued. And so he decided to hire me, and I started training him. And his back got stronger to the point where he was able to deadlift 400 pounds at the body weight of 150 pounds and got super fit and all that stuff, and loved the way I communicated certain things. And so he came to me and he said, look, he goes, I have a background in internet marketing. I've worked with motivational speakers. I think if you put something together, I can market it and we'll be able to sell it. And so that's when I created MAPS, our first MAPS program, MAPS Anabolic. So I created that program, and part of our approach or strategy to be able to sell that online program was to create some type of online authority, because although I had a reputation and authority in my local area, like if you come to San Jose and you talk to trainers, you go to gyms, quite a few people know me. I've grand opened a few gyms in the area. I've managed, trainers. I've trained quite a bit of trainers and clients. But you go outside of San Jose and, nobody knows who I am. And I'm not like this super crazy shredded muscular dude. I train naturally. I'm not unattractive, but I'm not like a supermodel or anything like that. So I didn't have those things going for me, which if you want to sell something online, a lot of times, you want to have those things going for you, right? Like just be this super shred yak dude or good looking, and then people might listen to you. So we're like, okay, well, how are we going to build authority? And so we had a few ideas. And one of the ideas was to start a podcast. And in the podcast, I'd be able to communicate fitness ideas and, kind of do what we do now. And then through that, people would listen and be like, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. Now I think I want to buy his fitness program because it's probably going to be good. So that was kind of the goal. And so during this period of time, I had been in contact with one of my co-hosts, Adam Schaefer. Now we'd never really met in person. We might have met one or two times in person in passing, because we were both managers for 24 Hour Fitness a long time ago when we were much younger. And so we knew of each other, and I ended up being friends with him on Facebook because we had, mutual friends, and I could see that he did this huge transformation with his own body. He let himself get out of shape because he had changed industries. Then he got shredded and decided to compete in the IFBB and become a pro physique competitor. And then he had accomplished it and did this awesome stuff. And I'd always heard from other people, you should meet this guy. You and him would totally get along. And so I'm kind of watching this. And in the meantime, he's watching me. And so I created this MAPS program with Doug. We put together this whole sales video for it. And I thought, I wonder what Adam's opinion is, because I know he's in the industry. He was a pro competitor. He just became a professional physique competitor. People say I should always, talk to this guy. So I want to see what he thinks. So I sent him the program, and I sent him the sales videos and the promotional videos that we had shot. He called me right after. He watched it, called me right up, and he's like, this is perfect. This is exactly some of the stuff that I'd like to communicate. We're all on the same wavelength. So we start talking, and, we decided let's start a podcast together. So that's when the decision was like, okay, let's all start a podcast. So when we started the podcast, the goal was to build an audience and then see what happens. Like, it wasn't like, we're going to monetize here, we're going to sell this, we're going to sell that. It was, let's start the podcast. Let's see if we can build an audience. And then if we build an audience, then we think that will kind of dictate where we should go from, what direction we should move from there. And so that's what we did. So we started the podcast, and for a year that's all we did. We did podcasts, and we didn't monetize anything. We had not a single sponsor, and we didn't sell a single program or product. It was all about just providing as much information as possible and hopefully building trust and authority with a community. And the podcast did exceptionally well. In that first year, took us about a year to get 1 million downloads, which is it's not a bad performance for a first year of a podcast. And now we average obviously much more, but that first year we had that kind of growth. And by the end of that year, people were begging us for a program or something. Like, we got messages from people all the time. Like, I don't care what you make, I'll buy it. I love your show so much. Like, make a t-shirt, make a program, like supplement, something. And so I had the MAPS program already in the back burner that we had produced and created and all that stuff. And Adam and Justin they loved it. They loved the program. They loved the concepts in it. They had tried some of the concepts. They were also exceptional trainers themselves. So it wasn't like it wasn't like I had discovered the cure for cancer. A lot of the stuff that I had talked about, and it's just truths that come with training people for 20 years. And they had come to a lot of the same conclusions. And so at the end of a year, everybody was like, what if we just sell your program? And so we agreed, and we sold the first MAPS program, and then we created a bunch of MAPS programs together after that. And that's kind of the direction, we went. And, of course, later on we had sponsors and all that stuff. But yeah, that first year, we didn't ask for a single dime. It was all about delivering as much content as possible, as much value as possible, and then seeing what would go from there. But we all, I still own my facility, and, Adam and Justin were still training people. And we didn't leave to go full time until, I want to say, I think it was after a year. After like a year and a half, we all left or totally, I sold my facility and everybody quit, and we did this full time.
So as you guys have grown, one of the interesting things about your show in particular is that you're not shy about branching into other subjects, and it seems like it's maybe just kind of woven into your personality. And I don't know about the other guys, but you're sort of interested in different things like the free market and some of the governmental conversations and things like that. And I'm wondering how has that been? And in life, I think there's a lot of times where people really want to box you in, and they want to say like, nope, that's the fitness guy, and people have trouble when they try to like move to a different swim lane. It's like, no. They don't get as good of a reaction because people are like, no, you're the fitness guy. And I'm curious for you guys, how has it been as you've tried to sort of have an amalgamation of different topics and try to like pursue these things you're interested in?
Well, objectively speaking, if we were just to judge it by our downloads and our reach and stuff like that, objectively speaking, it's been a tremendous success. So that tells us that people seem to like it. Now, we didn't necessarily do that. I mean, of course, if we thought people would totally hate it and it would destroy our brand, we probably wouldn't have done it. Or at least we maybe would have started a separate podcast. But, one thing that we kind of have in common is if we're passionate about something, it's very hard to keep us from saying something about talking about something. So, and I know I share this with my co-hosts, especially me and Adam. Like, if there's something we want to talk about and we're told we can't talk about something, or we feel like we can't, it just tends to bubble up and bubble out and come out of our mouths. And, for better or worse, thank God it seems to be working out for us. So I don't know how we would have been able to control that in the first place. But from a business standpoint, when we named our show Mind Pump, we knew we would be a fitness podcast, especially initially. We knew we would focus on heavy on fitness. But we also knew that we don't want to limit ourselves to just fitness. When we were sitting down dreaming about the future of Mind Pump, the brand, and all that stuff, we knew we wanted it to be Mind Pump Media. So we wanted to have a media company where we could produce lots of content and media. The podcast is just one arm of that. We have a YouTube channel and social media, and now we're doing blogs and other stuff. So we knew we wanted to be a media company, but we also wanted to be able to be known for communicating our ideas, maybe not being authorities on every idea. I think we're definitely most well-versed in fitness, but just, if you can become a personality through media, social media, whatever, if you can be someone that people just want to listen to and want to hear your opinion, there's a lot you can do with that. There's a lot of directions. And so we named the show Mind Pump because it sounded like fitness, but it could be anything, right? Mind Pump. Wow. We can go a lot of directions. So we knew that from the start. And we know now, like, okay, we're going to start branching out and talking about different things. And our show tends to be segmented that way. Like the first half of the show tends to be funny stories, our personal accounts of things, our opinions on current events, whether it's economics, politics, whether it's technology, you name it, whatever we're into, we're going to have an opinion and we're going to talk about it. And it's entertaining, whether you agree or disagree with us. Hopefully you're entertained by it. And then the second half of the show is very fitness heavy. And it seems people seem to like it. People seem to enjoy it. We're reaching a new audience. We're getting people now who, and we've actually had this for a while. We'll have a whole segment of people that'll listen to just the first half of the show. So they'll tell us like, oh, I don't really care about the fitness stuff, but I love hearing you guys bullshit and talk about current events. And then we'll get another segment of our fans who are, was like, oh, I fast forward the beginning part because I just want to hear the fitness stuff. And that's totally fine with me. If we're able to reach more people, that's great. So it seems to be working out. We'll see what happens.
Right. Yeah. And it definitely from the outside seems to, I know in my own life and from what I've seen a lot, people really definitely have trouble like letting people kind of evolve, they like want to keep you in one place. And on that subject, I'm curious, through all the people that you've had on and through all the conversations that you guys have had, and sometimes when you have a conversation that's deep enough with someone, you kind of start to realize like how you actually feel about something as you that's why talk therapy is a big thing. I'm curious, from that beginning show to now, has there any been like really big kind of paradigm shifts that like maybe you've changed your opinion on or realized or, that you didn't start with? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah. I used to make a big deal about post-workout nutrition. So like, oh, you got to have your shake and do that. And, we were, as through the course of the show, you're presented with more and more information. You're reading more and more literature. And so we've had to go back and retract some of our previous opinions and tell people it's really not that important. And, unless you're working out later in the day, you can eat 2 or 3 hours later. It's not going to make a big difference. And in fact, in the context of inflammation, if you are in an inflamed state, which a lot of people are, whether due to stress or lack of sleep or poor gut health, eating right after you work out is probably a bad idea because exercise itself causes a rise in systemic inflammation, and inflammation in the gut, can set the stage for things like leaky gut syndrome and food intolerances. And I think, and this is one of the reasons why they think, or scientists think, that if you look at if you were to take all the fitness enthusiasts and athletes out of the population, and then you were to study their, what percentage of them suffer from gut health issues, it's actually a larger percentage than the regular population. They think that may be one of the reasons why is that constant state of inflammation and then feeding, and there may be some other factors too. That's speculation, but so that was one thing. Our approach on foam rolling, used to talk about how foam rolling, broke up adhesions in the areas that you were pressing on, and how that's the best way to set yourself up before your workout. We now know that foam rolling is a tool, but it's actually not the best way to get set up in your workout. And there aren't adhesions that you're breaking up, and it's a totally different thing. I remember, learning about how impactful the central nervous system is to everything you do in fitness. And one of the ones that blew me away, and I remember there was an episode in particular where, sometimes you come to realizations as you're talking about them.
Right.
And I was talking about the importance of the central nervous system. I've used this analogy many, many times where the central nervous system is like, if you look at a stereo system, the central nervous system is like the amplifier and the speakers are like the muscles. So if you have these big, powerful speakers, but you have a weak amplifier, you're not going to get much sound. And so I've used that analogy many, many times. And then it dawned on me that your body's ability, everything from mobility to your muscles' extensibility, your range of motion, that's all central nervous system. When you're stretching a muscle, you're not actually lengthening the muscle. The muscle doesn't get any longer. You're not making it more pliable in the sense that you're not making it like, it's not like you warm up a rubber band and because the rubber gets warm, it stretches more. What you're doing is you're training your central nervous system to allow for a larger range of motion. That's why you can stretch for 30 minutes and give yourself instant flexibility right away. Like I could take anybody, increase their range of motion by a couple inches at least in their hamstrings with 30 minutes of stretching. Now that doesn't mean it's permanent. Of course, it goes back to how it was before unless we continue to train that way. But within that 30-minute period of time, they didn't get 2 inches of length in their hamstring. What we did is we told the CNS to calm down, so to speak, or to allow for a larger range of motion. So that was a big one. A big one in business. I used to think that in order to create a successful business in social media, or a new media, as I like to call it, you need to have like hundreds of thousands of followers or millions of followers. Like that was the way, like get millions of followers. And that's the only way to make a living in fitness or in media. And I started to realize and learn that that's one way. That's one way to do it. And your odds of doing that, no matter how hard you work, are extremely small. But really, if you want to make a living through new media, you don't need hundreds of thousands or millions of followers. You just need like a few thousand people who really, really, really think you're valuable, who really find lots of value in what you do and your information. And that few thousand people easily turns into a 6-figure income. And if you're really good and you create tremendous amounts of value, it might even be able to turn into a 7-figure income. I mean, if you can get 1,000 people to give you $1,000 for something, maybe it be coaching or a seminar or something that they found tremendously valuable, that's $1 million. You see what I'm saying? So you just need thousands of people, tons of value. You've got yourself a business. And I remember learning that about halfway through, and I was like, oh shit, that's the approach right there. Because try to get millions of followers, like good luck with that. That's tough, and you got to sell your soul sometimes to do that.
Right. Yeah, it's like the 1,000 true fans approach.
Exactly.
One of the things you brought up right there was the central nervous system. I know, like, one of the things that I've heard you guys talk about before is training the central nervous system suboptimally. And I'm wondering, is that, like, what are some of the ways for people to think about doing that? Because I think your analogy with the amplifier is really good. It's really difficult for people to grasp this idea that the central nervous system is maybe something that could be trained and also something that should even be focused on while you're training.
Yeah. So frequency of training is what will really give you a great response with the way your CNS fires your muscles. The best athletes in the world, or at least the most study that's gone into this, has to do with Olympic weightlifting. Olympic weightlifting, of all resistance training modalities and sports, by far has the most research. And during the Cold War, the Soviet Union invested lots and lots of money and time into trying to create the strongest weightlifters. And then when the Iron Curtain went up, or the Berlin Wall fell down, or communism was defeated, or whatever you want to say, a lot of their coaches came over to the U.S. and taught us some of their methods. And some of the stuff that they do is these Olympic lifters very, very seldomly lift weights to failure. They just don't. They don't. You don't see Olympic weightlifters testing their maxes very often. It's definitely something they do, but it's done judiciously and it's not done often at all. For the most part, they're lifting at max weight, and they're just perfecting their ability to fire and their form. And that adaptation is able to create an athlete that has tremendous strength and power in a small package, just tremendous. So if you take that and you apply that to yourself and your training, that understanding, with some of the stuff that we know about bodybuilding and hypertrophy, you can get some pretty damn remarkable results. Now, there's a couple of other things you want to kind of look at. Like, and the cool thing is now we have studies to support this. 5-10 years ago when I was talking about this, there was nothing to support this. But when you work out and you lift weights, you're sending a signal to your body that tells it to adapt into, adaptation to resistance training usually means build, right? So build muscle. Well, that signal says build, and it says build for about, 24 to 40 to 72 hours. That's what the study showed. 24, 72 hours, your body says build. After that, the signal drops very quickly and stays flat or goes under, actually starts to go below. And because your body's always adapting. So it's either, in the case of muscle, it's either building or losing. So if you think to yourself, like, wow, 24 to 72 hours. So if I work out my chest really hard on Monday and I wait till next Monday to train my chest, that means that there's like 3 or 4 days or more where not only am I not building, but there may be a few days in there where it stops building and reverses. And so people find themselves in a situation, this is quite common, where they go to the gym, they train super hard, they get really sore, they rest a full week, they go back to the gym, and there's no strength gains, no muscle gains, and they repeat, get really sore, recover, right. Go back to the gym. It's just over and over again. And so what you want to understand about that is, A, the muscle building signal needs to be elevated more often than it's not. although so that will create more positive. That's a positive, tissue, right? If it's up more than it's down, then you're going to build more than you lose. So you need to send a signal more frequently to that area than just once a week. And that's every study that's been done has shown that signal in very experienced trained individuals, that signal will last 12 to 18 hours. So it's even shorter than it is for non-trained individuals. So you need to send it more frequently. And B, recovery is separate from adaptation. In other words, you're still sore on Thursday, so your body's still recovering, but it stopped building on Wednesday or Tuesday. Not only does it stop building, but now it's going backwards. And if you don't, if someone doesn't believe me, try this experiment out. Go to the gym and do, 50 sets of failure squats. Like beat the absolute living shit out of your legs as hard as you can for as long as you can. Like for sure guarantee yourself that you're going to be sore for a week. Then go home and lay in bed and don't move for a week. Have somebody bring you food for an entire week. After you're done recovering, get out of bed when your legs aren't sore anymore, measure your legs and go test your squat. And I guarantee you'll be weaker and smaller. And although you were recovering that entire time. So it's important to understand that recovery is separate from adaptation. Recovery is healing. Adaptation is not healing. Adaptation is trying to become more resilient to stress or to become more efficient and better at whatever demands you're asking of your body. And so understanding that, then you start to say, okay, well, it's probably more beneficial than rather than hitting my chest on Monday for 20 sets and that muscle building signal being gone after Wednesday, maybe I do 7 sets on Monday and then hit it again on Wednesday for another 7 sets. And then maybe I hit it again on Friday for 6 sets. So now I'm still doing 20 sets like I was before, but the difference is I'm hitting it more frequently because I'm getting that muscle building signal to rise. And maybe I shouldn't go to failure so often because then I'm just going to prioritize recovery when I want adaptation. I don't give a shit about damage and recovery, although that's a part of the formula, of course. Some damage does help trigger muscle growth as well, and it is part of the equation. It's not the only part of the equation, and if you just focus on that, you're not going to get very far. So maybe instead of just beating the crap out of myself so hard and going to failure, maybe I should stop about 1 or 2 reps short of failure. Now, studies show that when you apply that, people respond better as well. And if you combine all of that, just those 2 pieces of information, train more frequently, train hard, but don't go to failure, watch what happens within 1 or 2 weeks. Watch what happens. You'll go to the gym, you'll be stronger. Your body will start to change. It'll blow you away.
Yeah, and that's something that I think a lot of people could benefit from because there's so many people out there, I think, that they don't feel like they got a good workout if they weren't destroyed. And it's a lot of times it's like if you start training someone, and I'm sure you guys have seen this, it's like they feel like they're like, oh, I need more, and then they'll try to go do more on top. And it's like you have to just trust the methodology to a certain degree.
That comes from 2 places. It comes from the myth that is no pain, no gain myth, which is the worse it feels, the better it is for you. There's a little bit of truth in that, but there's mostly false. It's mostly false. That's not true for the most part. And it also comes from the myth or the psychological phenomena that a lot of us suffer from, which is if you don't truly care about yourself, and what I mean by that is, do you take care of yourself like somebody that you truly care about? Okay. Ask yourself that question. If you do, if you really understand that, then you stop treating exercise and diet like punishments. So let's say I go to the gym and I hate my body. I'm fat. I'm disgusting. I can't stand how I look. Well, there's a part of this workout is punishing myself for being fat. And so feeling that pain and hurting myself and beating the crap out of myself, it gives me a little bit of relief because it's like my penance. Like I'm disgusting. I'm fat. I ate a super burrito for breakfast or for lunch this morning, today. So now I'm going to go beat the crap out of myself. I'm going to sweat that burrito out and I'm just going to punish myself. And we get a little bit of pleasure and satisfaction out of that because we don't like ourselves. And this is true for anybody who goes to the gym because they hate themselves or hate the way they look. You're there and you're in that pain. You're justifying that pain. Or in fact, you're enjoying that pain because it's a punishment. And why are you punishing yourself? Because you don't like yourself or, you really hate something about yourself. So those are the two reasons, that the whole no pain, no gain myth, and then also treating yourself as if you would treat somebody that you hated.
Right. And it's almost like the Jordan Peterson rule to take your medication.
That's exactly the way I'm communicating it. In fact, right now is directly from how he communicated. I thought it was so eloquent the way he put it in that book. And so since reading that, I've been able to communicate it much more effectively.
Right. Yeah. And if you guys don't know what we're talking about, go check out Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life, and we'll link it up in the show notes because I think it's a must read. I'm buying it for all of my family this year.
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely awesome.
And one thing I want to piggyback on that real quickly is just to say, like, this idea of training suboptimally. I've seen the exact same kind of adaptation occur within endurance. Anybody that's been following this show knows I've, in the last 2 years or a year, actually really gotten into the ultra endurance community. And for me, I was finding that if I would go out on Saturday and Sunday and I would try to put in 12 miles on Saturday and then another 12 on Sunday, I would be pretty wrecked until Wednesday, and it would be hard. My testosterone levels, hormone levels would be crashed, and it would be hard to train. But if I ran 4 miles every 4 hours, 3 times each day, which is much, much easier, much more suboptimal, my adaptation was not only better, but I also could train earlier. And so if you're listening to the concepts that Sal's talking about right now, you can apply that to, damn near any physical pursuit, I think.
It's how the body adapts to most things. So if we look at some of the most clear examples of adaptation, like here's a good one. I use this one all the time. Your body adapts to UV rays by, getting your skin darker. So your skin tans because your body's trying to adapt to the sun and become more resilient to it, right? It's a very basic, clear example of adaptation. So let's say I want to go and I want to get a really nice, deep, dark tan. What's going to yield me better results? If I go outside on Monday in a sunny day and I lay out in the sun for 3 hours straight, or if I go out and I do 30 minutes a day for the next, 5 days, which one's going to give me a better tan? Well, it's obvious that the first option of 3 hours in the sun for, straight, that's just going to give me a sunburn. It's going to prioritize recovery, and my body's not even going to care about adaptation at that point. It just needs to heal. I'm going to be a wreck. If I go out and do the 30 minutes at a time exposure, I give my body, I send it a signal, it adapts to that signal. I send it another signal, it adapts to that signal, and I just keep on that path. I'm going to get, the results that I'm looking for. This is true for most things. You want to learn something. How about that? Like, you want to learn a new language. Do you do 7 hours of French lessons on Monday or an hour every day? Which one do you think is going to give you, which one's going to help you learn French more effectively? Doing it all day one day or doing a little bit every single day. So it's no different for resistance training or endurance training or anything else. That those frequent signals that you send, training under that threshold of max, gets the body to adapt, and it allows you to circumvent or at least work with the big limiting factor, which is your ability to recover.
Yeah, I really like this idea that this kind of underlying linear progression that you need in order to adapt in fitness will help you adapt to damn near anything in life. So that's a really good point. So the final question is the Lionheart Kicker, and we try to ask every single guest that we have on here, and it's based on advice. So if you could give blanket advice and it were guaranteed everybody in the world would hear it and it would be translated to every language, and maybe they wouldn't all follow it, but they would definitely hear what you said. And this can be based on, fitness. This can be based on just life advice. But if you were given this kind of a platform, what would you tell people?
So I'm a big individualist in the sense that I subscribe to the idea that each, person is an individual, and each person is responsible only really at the end of the day for themselves and their own character. And simultaneously, the one thing you have the biggest impact over or the most control over or the ability to change the most is yourself. You have far more control over changing you than you do over changing others or changing other things and all that stuff. And so my advice is actually what I said earlier, which is this: take care of yourself or treat yourself like somebody you care about. And I think if all of us did that, if the whole world simultaneously started to treat themselves like someone they cared about, I think we would solve a lot of the problems that plague us in the world.
Yeah, I completely agree. For people that are listening to this and they want to follow along with your journey and support what you guys are doing, what is the best place for them to do that?
So my personal Instagram page is Mind Pump Sal, but obviously the podcast is Mind Pump. You can find that on almost all podcast platforms. We also have a YouTube channel, totally different content, exercise demos, interviews on there as well. That's Mind Pump TV. And then finally, if people are interested in finding out more about the programs that we write, because that's what we do, we write fitness programs and we design them for specific goals. You know, like if you're an athlete or if you're a bodybuilder, you want to build strength or you want to be you want to correct imbalances or whatever. We have a program probably for you, and it's all designed and mapped out for you. And you can find all of that and the information, all those things at mindpumpmedia.com.
Awesome. And if you guys are driving or if you're busy right now, don't worry about it. When you're done listening, head to lionheartrad.io, and we will link all of the resources that we've talked about today up in the show notes. Sal, thanks for being on today. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your journey with us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being on the show. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Thanks for listening to Lionheart Radio. I hope that the information from today's show will make you fitter, happier, and healthier. For the show notes of this episode and every episode, head to www.lionheartrad.io. Yep, just like Lionheart Radio. And please, if you have the time, head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps us to know that we're on the right track in delivering you reliable information and value. As always, feedback is welcomed. If you have any comments on the show or like to suggest a guest, send me an email at rick@luavive.com. That's LUAVIVE.com. Thanks for your support, and we will see you next time.
Bitch, I feel good. Don't I look stupendous? My shine is so endless, and shit you can do to end this. Even when I'm dead, niggas still gon' bump that chip shit. Coke, white, Escalade on cinches for you dipshits. So you won't forget this. Midwest nigga be the coldest.